That's fascinating. That curiosity actually is a mechanism to belong. You know, what's interesting about this is I was born in New Jersey. I then flew and lived with my grandparents in India, then came back, moved around here every 2 years. One of the things that I often talk about is that empathy for me was a survival strategy. Curiosity was actually a way to create space for the other to accept me.
Exactly.
But the other piece of this, and you mentioned this, is that there's this levels of systemic. There's the group, there's the individual. We've primarily stayed at the individual level. And so naturally, one of the things that I'm going to be thinking about is, well, I want to achieve policy change on X issue, or I care about Y issue, or in fact, that thing is so existentially pressing that I don't need to be curious because what I need to do is fix that issue. How do you balance and respond to the urgency to act with sort of the desire and necessity to be curious?
Yeah. I think one thing to recognize is action and conversation are not disconnected. I hear that a lot, that they're kind of mutually exclusive, that if you're spending energy just talking, you're not also mobilizing action. But thought, how people think, determines how they act. So the act of persuasion happens in the context of conversation in a really very real way. Another thing is that doesn't have to be exclusive, mutually exclusive, is this idea that either I fight or I get curious. But to me, the best fighter is the curious fighter. It's the one who's always checking his assumptions with what's actually in the hearts and minds of people today. With any topic that matters right now, it's constantly evolving because, again, we are a free and open American democratic society, and we're okay with the mess. That's what makes us beautiful. But it also means that you can't just write it all in a textbook, study the textbook, close the textbook, and then do your thing. You have to stay plugged in. This is one of the things I learned in my career as a journalist who became kind of known for a sort of engagement style of journalism where, look, all the people in the editorial meeting cannot possibly know what the community needs. Not by just sitting there and talking to each other. You have to have channels and habits and routines that are constantly being plugged back into the community that you serve. And so that's the same for any advocate. Any advocate needs to stay open. So don't use all your energy on that. Now, the mobilizing, the fighting, the advocacy, the protest, that is part of American democracy too. That's important. That's really important. But save some of your energy for some kind of routine check, some openness, because otherwise your world will become more narrow and you may start to believe that the reality of the debate you're having is something that isn't even real at all. You have to make sure you're questioning and challenging yourself.
So you have to make sure you're questioning, you have to make sure you're challenging, that in fact, curiosity is a mechanism for change. Now, what's interesting about this is that, and I've talked to you about this, is like, part of the reason why we call the podcast The Hopeful Majority is because I think that there's a vast group of people out there that are curious, that want a world in which we can listen to each other, that want a world in which it's okay to be wrong so that I can grow, that you don't have to necessarily punish me. But the reason why I got into this entire podcasting thing, I had to buy this microphone, is because all of us are just quiet. Like the hopeful majority is quiet. You know, where there's this vocal minority of people out there on all sides of the political spectrum that are sort of dominating the conversation. And I decided, like, you know, all right, I'm going to do my small piece and get out there and get involved. And somebody that's listening to this is doing their piece by listening and tuning in and getting active. To that person that's listening, they're thinking, well, Monica seems very eloquent, very engaged. Monica's got a specific story that positions her to be a leader on this issue. What is your message to somebody that's just listening to this and is like, well, what can I do? How do I take this in my personal agency and do something in my personal life? How do I affect the individuals around me?
I mean, one thing is to ask yourself a question. Who are the people that you tend to talk about but never with? Where do your judgments of your fellow Americans seem strongest without some kind of requisite amount of engagement to check the projections and misperceptions and assumptions that are bound to arise? So that's a challenging question, but it's a question that can inspire action. If you answer that question with a certain type of person, a certain group of people, then you have a kind of target. Just, is there a way that I could engage a little more with that kind of person? Can I put myself in a place where I hear more generously what this group is saying to themselves? But I don't want it to sound like such hard work, because really, as I've looked at curiosity, it is a muscle. It gets stronger as we practice it. And the thing that will already make so much difference is for you to take any action that makes you one little step more curious than you were. So that can mean you're in a conversation of disagreement and you want to jump in with your opinion. Ask one more question. Ask one more curious question that's actually driven at learning about the other person. Because you'll have more material upon which to get curious, and you'll be more likely to have the other person feel heard, which makes them more likely to hear you, which makes all of persuasion more effective. So even those tiny steps, you can even take a step that doesn't require any other person really there at all. The next time that you find a headline that represents some view that is popularly held but that you disagree with, read that article, not to doom scroll, not for ammo, but with the questions in your mind. What is the strongest argument on the other side? Said generously. And then what are the deep down honest concerns that are animating this person's perspective, anger? You can even look behind the anger. Don't let anger get in your way. Let anger be data that somebody really cares about this if they're angry. Okay, what is it that they really care about? What do they want to preserve? Not just what do they hate? What do they love?
Yeah. Is there ever a time to not be curious?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when it's an individual thing. So you cannot be curious. You cannot be open in a conversation if you don't feel secure in that conversation. If for whatever reason, the risk is too high, the temperature is too high and something's burning. You want the temperature to be high and for something to be cooking, right? But if something's burning, like my Instant Pot going burn, 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 like you stop the Instant Pot, you open the lid, you add some liquid. You get out of the conversation. I can't believe I just used a cooking analogy for the Instant Pot.
That's the way that this stuff is Instapots and curiosity. That's
exactly.
the title.
That's the thing. This is the analogy we all need.